Greetings, programs. Welcome to the start of a new series. What new series is this, you say? Well, I have run out of things to say or to complain about in my usual fashion. So what I'm going to do is to look into some of the things that I've mentioned before. One of the things I've mentioned before is Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality, which is a very entertaining way to learn about rationality and will ruin Harry Potter forever because basically everybody's a good deal smarter than they are in the real Harry Potter books. But that all comes from somewhere. Now, most of it comes from the Less Wrong website, which is founded by Eliezer Yudkowsky and contains a series of posts. Now, these posts were rounded up, tidied up, and put into a book called Rationality from AI to Zombies. This contains a lot of things about cognitive bias and stuff that I've mentioned in the past. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through the book a chapter at a time and basically spread the word, read it out to you, and for those few of you that like the sound of my voice, you can hear me reading books. And when I think of something useful to say that's not this, I'll do that too. Now, I highly recommend you get this book. It's available from the Less Wrong website for whatever you feel like paying. I think I got this for $15 because I'd read some of the passages before and thought they were really good, and I was really looking forward to getting it in a book format. It's also a hypertext PDF, so it contains links to other sources, other pages, wiki pages, and so forth, explaining in greater detail some of the things that you may already know. So if you already know it, you can just keep reading, and if you're not sure what a phrase, term, or even a place may be, you can click on the link and go find out and then come back, which is pretty cool, I thought. And in my opinion, it's generally well written. Now, there is a very cool intro, which I am going to skip over. I recommend you read the book for that. So I'm just going to start in with chapter 1. And there's going to be quite a few of these, but each chapter tends to be reasonably short and sweet. So hopefully I won't need to rabbit on for hours and hours and hours. And it's written in a sort of a conversational style, so I will be speaking as though I am the author, which is not the case. That would be Eliezer. So, chapter 1. What do I mean by rationality? I mean, 1. Epistemic rationality, systematically improving the accuracy of your beliefs, and 2. Instrumental rationality, systematically achieving your values. When you open your eyes and look at the room around you, you'll locate your laptop in relation to the table, and you'll locate a bookcase in relation to the wall. If something goes wrong with your eyes or your brain, then your mental model might say there's a bookcase where no bookcase exists. And when you go over to get a book, you'll be disappointed. This is what it's like to have a false belief, a map of the world that doesn't correspond to the territory. Epistemic rationality is about building accurate maps instead. This correspondence between belief and reality is commonly called truth, and I'm happy to call it that. Instrumental rationality, on the other hand, is about steering reality, sending the future where you want it to go. It's the art of choosing actions that lead to outcomes ranked higher in your preferences. I sometimes call this winning. So rationality is about forming true beliefs and making winning decisions. Pursuing truth here doesn't mean dismissing uncertain or indirect evidence. Looking at the room around you and building a mental map of it isn't different in principle from believing that the Earth has a molten core, or that Julius Caesar was bored. Those questions, being distant from you in space and time, might seem more airy and abstract than questions about your bookcase. Yet there are facts of the matter about the state of the Earth's core in 2015 CE, and about the state of Caesar's head in 50 BC. These facts may have real effects upon you even if you never find a way to meet Caesar or the core face to face. And winning here need not come at the expense of others. The project of life can be about collaboration or self-sacrifice rather than about competition. Your values here means anything you care about, including other people. It isn't restricted to selfish values or unshared values. When people say, X is rational, it's usually a more strident way of saying, I think X is true, or I think X is good. So why have an additional word for rational, as well as true and good? An analogous argument can be given against using true. There is no need to say, it is true that snow is white, when you could just say, snow is white. What makes the idea of truth useful is it allows us to talk about the general features of map territory correspondence. True models usually produce better experimental results than false methods is a useful generalization, and it's not one you can make without using a concept like true or accurate. Similarly, rational agents make decisions that maximize the probabilistic expectation of a coherent utility function is the kind of thought that depends on a concept of instrumental rationality, whereas it's rational to eat vegetables can probably be replaced with it's useful to eat vegetables, or it's in your interest to eat vegetables. We need a concept like rational in order to note general facts about those ways of thinking that systematically produce truth or value, and the systematic ways in which we fall short of those standards. Sometimes experimental psychologists uncover human reasoning that seems very strange. For example, somebody rates the probability Bill plays jazz as less than the probability Bill is an accountant who plays jazz. This seems like an odd judgment, since any particular jazz-playing accountant is obviously a jazz player. But to what higher vantage point do we appeal in saying that the judgment is wrong? Experimental psychologists use two gold standards: probability theory and decision theory. Probability theory is a set of laws underlying rational belief. The mathematics of probability describes equally and without distinction A. Figuring out where your bookcase is, B. Figuring out the temperature of the Earth's core, and C. Estimating how many hairs were on Julius Caesar's head. It's all the same problem of how to process the evidence and observations to revise, update, one's beliefs. Similarly, decision theory is the set of laws underlying rational action, and it is equally applicable regardless of what one's goals and available options are. Let P such and such stand for the probability that such and such happens, and let P, A, B, for the probability that both A and B happen. Since it is a universal law of probability theory that PA is greater than or equal to PA, B, the judgment that P, Bill plays jazz, is less than P, Bill plays jazz, and Bill is an accountant, is labelled incorrect. To keep it technical, you could say that this probability judgment is non-Bayesian. Beliefs and actions that are rational in this mathematically well-defined sense are called Bayesian. Note that the modern concept of rationality is not about reasoning in words. I gave the example of opening your eyes, looking around you, and building a mental model of a room containing a bookcase against the wall. The modern concept of rationality is general enough to include your eyes and your brain's visual areas as things that map. This includes your wordless intuitions as well. The math doesn't care whether we use the same English language word rational to refer to Spock and to refer to Bayesianism. The math models good ways of achieving goals or mapping the world, regardless of whether those ways fit our preconceptions and stereotypes about what rationality is supposed to be. This does not quite exhaust the problem of what is meant in practice by rationality, for two major reasons. First, the Bayesian formalisms in their full form are computationally intractable on most real-world problems. No one can actually calculate and obey the math any more than you can predict the stock market by calculating the movement of quarks. That's why there's a whole site called Less Wrong, rather than a single page that simply states the formal axioms and calls it a day. There's a whole further art to finding the truth and accomplishing value from inside a human mind. We have to learn our own flaws, overcome our biases, prevent ourselves from self-deceiving, get ourselves into good emotional shape to confront the truth, and do what needs doing, etc., etc. Second, sometimes the meaning of the math itself is called into question. The exact rules of probability theory are called into question by, e.g., anthropic problems in which the numbers of observers are uncertain. The exact rules of decision theory are called into question by, example, Newcomb-like problems in which other agents may predict your decision before it happens. In cases like this, it is futile to try and settle the problem by coming up with some new definition of the word rational and saying, therefore my preferred answer by definition is what is meant by the word rational. This simply raises a question of why someone should pay attention to your definition. I'm not interested in probability theory because it is a holy word handed down from Laplace. I am interested in Bayesian-style belief updating with Occam priors because I expect that this style of thinking gets us systematically closer to, accuracy, the map that reflects the territory. And then there are questions of how to think that seem not quite answered by either probability theory or decision theory, like the question of how to feel about the truth once you have it. Here again, trying to define rationality a particular way doesn't support an answer, but merely presumes one. I'm not here to argue the meaning of the word, not even if that word is rationality. The point of attaching sequences of letters to particular concepts is to let two people communicate, to help transport thoughts from one mind to another. You cannot change reality or prove the thought by manipulating which meanings go with which words. So, if you understand what concept I'm generally getting at with this word rationality, and with the subterms epistemic rationality and instrumental rationality, we have communicated. We have accomplished everything there is to accomplish by talking about how to define rationality. What's left to discuss is not what meaning to attach to the syllables rationality, though what's left is to discuss what is a good way to think. If you say, it is epistemically rational for me to believe X, but the truth is Y, then you are probably using the word rational to mean something other than what I have in mind. E.g., rationality should be consistent under reflection. Rationally looking at the evidence and rationally considering how your mind processes the evidence shouldn't lead to two different conclusions. Similarly, if you find yourself saying, the instrumentally rational thing for me to do is X, but the right thing for me to do is Y, then you are almost certainly using some other meaning for the word rational or the word right. I use the term rationality normatively to pick out desirable patterns of thought. In this case, or in any other case where people disagree about word meanings, you should substitute more specific language in this place of rationality. The self-benefiting thing to do is to run away, but I hope I would at least try to drag the child off the railroad tracks. Or, causal decision theory, as usually formulated, says you should 2-box on Newcomb's problem, but I'd rather have $1 million. In fact, I recommend reading back through this essay, replacing every instance of rational with foozle, and seeing if that changes the connotations of what I'm trying to say. If so, I say, strive not for rationality, but for foozality. The word rational has potential pitfalls, but there are plenty of non-borderline cases where rational works fine to communicate what I'm getting at. Likewise, irrational. In these cases, I'm not afraid to use it. Yet one should be careful not to overuse the word. One receives no points for merely pronouncing it loudly. If you speak over much of the way, you will not attain it. Right, so that's chapter 1, or page 1, or section 1 if you prefer. Nailing down a word that seems obvious, but is actually quite important to this whole book. It's the first word in the title of the book. And I'd just like to add my own thoughts here. I have read part of this book already, but then I thought, hey, what if other people who don't have the book or don't know the book could be told about it and we could learn together, which is what I'm doing this. So I have read the first bit of this. I'm not exactly sure what chapter I stopped on before I thought, I could do an audio thing of this. But some of this will be new to me completely. Others, not so much. Others I will have brushed up against in Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality. So I'm going to speculate a little bit about the Bill is a jazz player thing. I don't know yet because I haven't read all of the book, but I have an intuition about why the idea that Bill plays jazz is considered as less probable than Bill is an accountant who plays jazz. Why that actually makes sense. And we'll see if I'm right later on in the book. Here's my hypothesis. Bill plays jazz is kind of vague. It doesn't suggest any deep, intimate knowledge of Bill. If you say Bill is an accountant who plays jazz, it suggests you know significantly more about Bill. You not only know what he does for fun, plays jazz, You also know that he's an accountant. This suggests you know him reasonably well, which, while not logical, does provide impetus for someone to put greater weight on your opinions about what Bill does and your opinions about him. Thus, if you rattle off a whole bunch of facts about Bill, height, weight, what he does for fun, what he does for work, his favourite drink, his favourite food, and so on, it would suggest quite strongly that you know this Bill character quite well, which adds weight to what you're saying, which is a little bit less than if you just spout some single random fact like Bill plays jazz. That's my hypothesis as to why people find the second more probable than the first. Rational? No. We will find out later. That's all for section 1, a nice short one. I suspect the later ones will be a little bit longer, but this is our first attempt, so here's hoping you like it. Bye for now.